Well, my name is Megan Ravar. I'm really here today with both of my parents who run Hope4Families special education law firm. But a little bit about me: I was an educator in Los Angeles Unified Schools for about 8 years. I got my Master's of Arts in Education right here at Dominguez Hills. And right now I'm studying law at UCLA. So hoping to follow on in my parents' footsteps and continue the amazing work that we're doing at Hope4Families.
Fingers crossed. I'm Margaret McNair, and I'm the founding attorney at Hope4Families. It's been around about 14 years now, and all we do is special education. We hope through young geniuses like Megan to get into policy and high-stakes litigation, but as it stands, we just serve hundreds of individual students getting their special education needs met, and we do that free of cost. And I actually see a former client, and I had the privilege of speaking to her.
I'm Greg McNair, and I'm privileged to be on this panel with two beautiful women to my left. I am an attorney for Hope4Families, and I worked 18 years for the LA Unified School District in various capacities, including superintendent for charter schools, lots of other things, but I was also a lawyer for LAUSD, and one of my favorite assignments was to be the head of a team that actually helped principals. They would call to the Office of General Counsel and ask questions about various issues that they were facing, including issues surrounding special education. So my experience is a lot from the school district standpoint. I have a lot of experience from that standpoint and have some idea about how folks think in that regard and the experiences that they have on a day-to-day basis. They're trying to serve students who have unique needs. So I'm glad to be here with you all. I love this organization. I think it's so important, and even more important today than it was 5 years ago, because schools are very challenged by friends who call me from time to time who are still with school districts, indicate that schools are very challenged, and the people who get hurt most often and the worst when schools are challenges are the children that we represent and your kids. So we need to really make sure that the school districts are being held accountable for the requirements for their obligations under IDEA, which I think is probably one of the best laws the United States has ever passed in its history.
Let's give it up to this amazing kind of work that they're doing.
Can I just say a note about what's being passed out right now? Megan developed this when she was working for us, and it's really, I hope, a paradigm shift for you, where you are going to be going into an IEP meeting with your agenda. And you're having, if it's in person, copies for everyone. You're smiling, you're passing it out to the team. Thanks for being here, everybody. This is what we're going to be discussing. Does the school district have their own agenda? They do. Are they going to spend time on their own agenda? They are. Will there be enough time for your agenda? Maybe we'll have to reconvene. Remember that word. Appreciate you all. Appreciate the time. I understand you got to go. When will we be reconvening? Because we're not finished.
That's a
So
gem.
that's what those are.
That is a gem. That is an absolute gem. So we'll go to our first question. What factors should be considered when creating an IEP that spans across different educational stages to ensure continuity and progression?
Start by saying that the IEP should be viewed as a roadmap, really. I mean, we're really, when we even start from preschool, we're looking to the future for this young person. And every element of the IEP is actually important and should work together. And when I read decisions by the administrative law judges for the Office of Administrative Hearings that administers the due process, it is really clear that they see it the same way. We're looking in a visionary fashion from preschool to graduation.
To independent adulthood.
And to independent adulthood, right. The most important thing to me starts with the assessments. that's the tool. Those are the things that we use to actually, that in the school district should do to actually create the IEPs. So crucial. And I'll make this point, and I'm going to turn it over. But I think the point I want to make is that your involvement and your input is so important in the assessment process, because you know your child better than anyone. I know that school personnel sometimes want to make you feel like they know your child better than you do. It's simply not true. And I think most school people, school personnel understand that. I just want to, and the reason I want to bring this up and I want to emphasize it is because I just had a client who contacted me the other day, and she's really frustrated. And part of her the way that she wants to express her frustration is not cooperating in her mind with the school district. And what I told her is, please, you need to have a little bit of a paradigm shift here. These assessments are not only tools for the IEP, but this is information that you can use in the school life and in your personal life and in your personal interaction with your child. There's some really deep and rich information. The psychoeducational assessment, if your child's getting a speech and language assessment, and all those assessments, there's really deep and rich information that you can use not only in school, but through your entire life with your beloved child.
One, the continuity. Y'all, how are you going to have continuity when you don't remember what last year's IEP had in it?
Yes.
We can't all have binders that are well organized. I know some of you do. I've seen them. But we can't all have binders that are well organized with all of the child's IEPs, blah, blah, Great if you can. But if not, IEP team, I'm going to need a copy of last year's IEP. Let's just wait for a second until you can get one for me. Because I need to see what were last year's goals and how do they compare to this year's. Sometimes goals literally disappear. There's no indication of what happened. Is there no longer a need? So again, continuity, just very practical. Part of it has to do with keeping track of what these IEPs are talking about year to year. The second one is you giving yourself credit for understanding what you can understand. Sometimes the IEPs look like some crazy gobbledygook to you. That's okay. Ask questions, but the stuff you do understand, let's hone in on that, okay? And when there's a goal, ask, how's that going to be implemented? How are we going to get there? So I just don't want you to discount your own legitimate questions and your own expertise because you're intimidated by gobbledygook. If you can get an understanding of everything that's in that IEP, wonderful, yay. But if not, can we deal with what you do understand? And can you ask questions about what you do understand and also explore what you don't? I just want you to be able to access the document.
I would just want to make a quick comment. If the IEP looks like gobbledygook to you, sometimes it just is. It is. And I'm telling you, I've read IEPs that were so terrible.
Yes.
I don't know what you're saying here, and I don't know what the goal is. I don't know how they come together. The
Hallelujah.
goals and the accommodations come together,
Yes.
and the placement. Sometimes they are. So I don't want you to feel like there's something wrong with me because I don't understand it. Sometimes it just can't be understood. The other thing I would say is that with AI, if you have access to something like that, it's very helpful to just kind of quickly look up some of the terms. Just type it in and boom, the explanation of the terms will come to you. It's easier than surfing the web in that respect.
I would say for continuity for IEPs, one of the most important things is making sure that the IEP actually reflects your students' areas of need and the areas where they are challenged.
Yes.
I think there's two motivations for school staff when they oftentimes they might skate over a student's challenges in the IEP and not really detail it out. I think sometimes they're being well-meaning because they want to build up the student. They want to say all the positive things, and we do want to know the positive things. We do want to celebrate our students. However, it's really, really important that they're also documenting the things that are not so positive, the things that are not going well with this student's education, because it really helps to have a record of, okay, in second grade, they didn't meet the reading benchmarks. In third grade, again, they did not meet the reading benchmarks. In fourth grade, they didn't. When somebody is coming back and reading through their IEPs and they see that trajectory and the areas where they have not improved, it gives us much more leverage to come to the school district and say, we have it in their IEPs right here. They haven't made progress in this area. Another reason why it's really important is because the goals in the IEP are supposed to match up with the student's areas of need. Mm-hmm. The services that are offered in the IEP are supposed to be matching up with the student's areas of need. So it starts with the school district isn't kind of being a little bit, they're not being too clear about what the student is really struggling with. Mm-hmm. The student might actually be having really hard behavior challenges, but they're just gonna put on the IEP, sometimes the behavior is, and then it doesn't look as bad when the school district isn't offering behavior services.
There may literally not be a behavior or social emotional goal for a child who has severe difficulties in that area.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of continuity for our IEP, I think the present levels of performance section, it can't be underrated how important that section is. It might just seem like, oh, they're just writing down like, how is the kid doing right now? But the section actually needs to be really thorough. And the most important part is the areas where the student is not doing well. Yeah. I think from parents and educators, because we do want to build the students up, because we do want to focus on what's positive, sometimes we have a tendency to not really hone in on the areas of need, but the areas of need are the most important. So don't be afraid to go to the meeting, and when they're saying, oh, he or she is doing so well in this and so well in that, don't be afraid to say, but what about this? Because when I'm at home and doing work with them, it seems like they can't really add like that. Right. Or it seems like I'm having to walk them through how to sound out every word. They might want to focus on, well, last year they were reading this many words a minute and they jumped up to this many words. That's great, but at the same time, they're still this far off from the grade level benchmark. Mm-hmm. Whatever it looks like for your student, but it cannot be understated how important it is to make sure that even though it doesn't sound great, and even though it sometimes doesn't feel great, even though it sometimes feels discouraging, to really hone in on the areas that are not working. And when we see that trajectory over years in IEP, it gives an advocate a really good leverage to come to the district and say, it's been obvious that these struggles have been going on for a long time, and district, you haven't done anything to address it.
One thing that I just recently learned from a client, actually, a few months ago, is my client's child was having a problem with reading, but the teachers kept saying, oh, she's fine. So what my client did was took her phone while her child was doing her homework and she was trying to read and videotaped it. Took that videotape to the IEP meeting. Yeah, you said that my child's reading at this level. Look at how she's doing at home. So you might want to try that. Mm-hmm. If you're having trouble with the school district personnel questioning your credibility or questioning what you're saying about what your child's doing at home, bring evidence of it. Easy enough to take your phone and do a video.
And it's bringing your common sense and your real life experience into the room.
That's right.
Lots of data, but can we tell a story that will illustrate exactly?
Yes.
And I think about when I had a client that they were going to take away speech services because he wasn't making any progress, and the speech and language pathologist said, I don't even know. It just seemed to me from a common sense standpoint that maybe you needed to add more speech services.
Right.
Instead, so I just said, hey, it's just me, but this is what I'm wondering. And then we went with that. Why not? What the heck? Bringing your common sense, your lived experience into the room with the team.
Excellent. Gems. That's just some gems. Drop down questions, comments. I know we got one here, one on the other end, and then we'll come to you. Please.
Hi, I have a question. At school, I'm struggling with my son. They're fighting me off with the IEP. They say that he doesn't need the services because he doesn't show it in class. But his previous test, his parent conference, his grades, they're coming down to like, he needs help. They're telling me, oh no, he's on grade level or he's above grade level. But the scores and the testing that come back to me that I have in paper are saying otherwise. Teachers say otherwise. My son is diagnosed with autism and ADHD. So the ADHD kind of interferes and starts like moving, talking too much. He walks out of class sometimes. Sometimes he starts like throwing stuff in class, little stuff like that. And the teacher's like, oh no, that's not a problem. It's just sometimes he talks. I was like, oh, but he's looking at me when I'm talking, I'm giving instruction. I was like, yeah, but that doesn't mean that he's paying attention here. Like, he can look at you, but he's not going to be paying attention to you. So we get home, and then he struggles with the homework, with math, the vocabulary. And then I try to advocate for him, but they're telling me, no, well, he doesn't qualify for services because he's not struggling here. We don't see it here. What can I do in order to get them to actually listen to me?
Does your child have an IEP, or are you trying to? Okay, getting your child an IEP. You ask for an assessment, step one. The school district has about 2 weeks to give you a yes or a no. If it's a yes, it needs to be in writing in the form of an assessment plan. And once that assessment plan gets signed by you, they have 60 days. So, because, let me just say, because I need you to cut through all this conversation. It's just as simple as that. Time's a wasting. Another semester is going to pass. They have 2 weeks, about 15 days. And if they say nothing, that's a no. And you can decide at that point whether or not you want to file a due process. When you ask, you might ask saying something like, gee, I'd like to have my child assessed, and my understanding is that you're going to be getting me an assessment plan in 15 days. I really want to thank you in advance for your cooperation. I do not want to go through due process. Can we get this done? So that they'll know who you are.
I did it in writing. I sent it out. I turned it in personally. Still nothing.
Then what do you need to do? Then what do you need to do as of last November? You can file a due process complaint yourself as a parent. The process is developed in such a way that parents can file due process. Has anybody in here ever done this themselves? I've known of, have you? Yeah. Is it doable? Did you find it doable? Okay. So, and I mean, there's us, there's other special education law firms, but there's also you. You have the option, and if it doesn't work out and you don't like it and blah, 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 then you can call us. But you can call us the second they don't respond to you after day 15.
I wanted to add something on that just to clarify. When she's talking about 15 days, that's the law. So this is like a federal statute. These are California statutes. So when you go to your school and you tell them about the needs that your child is experiencing, and you ask for an assessment, the best thing to do is to put it in writing so that you have the proof. But whether you put it in writing or not, it is the law that the school has 15 days from then to either provide you with the assessment plan or to give you some type of valid reason for them saying that they aren't going to assess your child. That they don't have a valid reason in this circumstance. From what she just said, there's no valid reason in this circumstance.
And it should have been in writing.
Right.
That's the thing too. Their no should have been in writing. They should have given you, it's called prior written notice.
And then so once you get that assessment plan within 15 days, the school then has 60 days to actually complete all the assessments and do the actual IEP.
Right.
So once you've come to the school, the clock is ticking, and we're not talking about what the school should do, what's best practices. We're talking about the school that's breaking the law at this point.
Right.
So then it becomes you, as the parent, as the advocate, what route do you want to take? Do you want to go with a special education law firm? There are some benefits to that. Do you want to try to pursue due process by yourself? There's some benefits to that. Or also a lot of districts do have inter-district Like within your school district, there are ways to file, every school district is different, but there might be ways to file a complaint and do it within the school district, resolution within your school district without having to take legal action.
Informal dispute resolution.
Right, informal dispute resolution. So there's a lot of resources online and things like that for how to go through due process and things like that. But even you could be bold enough to go to the school and ask them. You and I both know the 15 days is up. Who do I go to next? Like, who's the next up in the chain of command where I could start what is the dispute resolution process at this school so I can go ahead and get it started? Because we both know what's going on here. So I just want to make it very clear that when we're saying 15 days and we're saying 60 days, we're not making suggestions. We're not saying it's the best practice from the school. We're not saying it would be cool if the school did this. We're saying the school is breaking the law at this point. So it's in your hands now how you want to do it.
Because this is how powerful that law is. It didn't even need to be in writing. That's one. You didn't even need to ask because the school has an affirmative duty to find and to assess children who have a suspected special education need. That's how on your child's side the law is. So you actually didn't have to open your mouth. You really didn't. In order for us to be able to come in, file a due process and say, school, you should have initiated this process because it was your obligation. The law's on your side.
We're just getting started. I'm already feeling empowered. Everybody else, we got one down here. We see who's to the next, and we're gonna come to the middle.
So my child has an IEP.
But I don't think they're lying to you.
Right.
Because you're having an IEP with team members that are at the school site. Your school site, in so many instances, is woefully ignorant about what's available, about what they can do. And I mean, I gotta tell my story. I have to tell my story about the woman that I was teaching Sunday school with, assistant principal. And she was at an inner city middle school doing the best job she knew. Got transferred to a school in the valley, and it was an affluent neighborhood. And her instructions were there, give them what they want, otherwise they're just gonna file due process. And she became aware of this entire world of things that she could do and could offer, so much so that when I went back to her old school and had an IEP, her replacement, I had to tell him the story, ask him to please get on the phone and confirm what I'm saying about his ability to do what I was asking him to do. Thank goodness he did. He came back. It's like, okay, now I know. I mean, so they literally may not know. They may not know.
Yeah, I would say that in my experience, and I think Megan can back me up on this, most teachers only get maybe one class in their education program on special education,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
And so we're talking, what, 6, maybe 8, 10 hours of special education. So, and all principals are ex-teachers. So you have at the school site a lack of expertise in the process, an understandable a lack of expertise in the process, and if it's big enough school district, what's available. And so you're gonna face things like that, and so you're gonna be educating these people in some instances about what they are supposed to be doing. And if they're smart enough, they should go. They should listen to you and find
And bold
out.
enough.
And bold enough. It is.
Unafraid. They have to be
Right.
unafraid.
I mean, there are internal political issues.
We gotta do one more,
Go ahead.
and then we gotta move to the next.
That's not a bad place to be, and isn't it amazing that mom is at a point and you're at a point where you gotta figure this out? And I think it's an empowering thing though, once you recognize that nobody's gonna come save the situation and no magical teacher's gonna fly in or anything like that. The good news is, how many times a year can you have an IEP meeting? When can you have an IEP meeting? Whenever you need one. It's, I mean, if he's thriving, the goal for this young man, sounds to me, is that eventually he's gonna be in a gen ed class. It's real too, but we don't wanna hold our kids back because we wanna be comfortable. The standard in the law is that a educational program has to be developed and implemented to meet his unique individual needs. And it sounds as though you're running up against a lot of wrong here, and that mom's response is, so again, that's always the question. So what are you gonna do? So what are you going to do?
Yeah, and the need has to be met in the least restrictive environment.
Yes.
So,
I'm just saying.
and his environment seems to be a pretty restrictive environment.
And mom's parents are.
Listen, look, there's an impasse here. When there's an impasse, something has to be done to move. And so mom has got to ratchet this up in some way. And mom can do it in a way that is incremental. She doesn't have to go nuclear, but mom has to do something, even if it's incremental. And I would say things like, this is an easier one, starting to sprinkle special education speak and special education knowledge into her request. So, for example, she's not saying, oh, this teacher, this or no. She's saying LRE, least restrictive environment. Because again, now folks wonder, who's this woman? Wow, we better level up. So I think that's a high impact but low stakes move, is making these requests. And again, no talking except at the IEP meeting. We're writing, and then we're having IEP meetings, and we're asking for things, and we're sprinkling knowledge to give them a sense of who we are. But you're also, as an advocate, which you are, you can be present at IEP meetings, of course. All right, mom is doing things like refusing to sign the IEP at the meeting, saying, thank you everyone, love you, mwah. You are awesome. I'm gonna take this home, and I just wanna look at it. You just need to let them know who you are. You're that parent who is going to be reviewing the IEP, and then maybe signing, but signing in partial disagreement. This is what I disagree with. So things like that. So she doesn't have to go fight in due process if she doesn't want to, if it scares her.
Can I just add one quick thing about mom's hesitance to go to the IEP meeting because she's Spanish speaking, and sort of just the fact that we understand that your special needs child is part of the family, right? And so we have to look at this holistically. What can mom take right now, handle right now, and just in trying to navigate this, because the advice that Margaret's giving is right on. But I understand that sometimes parents just not in the position psychologically or emotionally or just even physically.
You don't have the bandwidth.
But here, this is what I would suggest to mom with respect to her discomfort is, you can bring anybody to the IEP you want, right? Your best friend, who's just, you can hold that person's hand and just be there.
Your
anybody
mother,
you want to.
Grandma can come.
Yeah, anybody.
Grandma and aunties.
So,
because they've got a posse of 11 people. Or bring your posse.
So just do.
And they will try to intimidate you by number.
That's right.
They will. And I have to jump in just to keep the conversation
Okay,
going.
can I just say though too, I really want to say this, I'm sorry, I have to say, mom needs her own Spanish interpreter that is not a member of the IEP team.
Right.
The
Yes.
assistant principal cannot do the interpreting for her.
No.
The assistant principal is there as a member of the IEP team. Mom needs a separate Spanish interpreter for her who's doing nothing but interpreting.
Right. It's an obligation. The district has to provide that.
They have to.
I'm gonna read this next question and we will continue the conversation.
Okay.
How can schools ensure that students receive appropriate accommodations and modifications as outlined in their IEPs, especially during transitions between grades or even schools?
So I saw that question. The first thing that occurred to me is parents, please make sure that the teacher understands that your child has an IEP. I mean, Megan can speak to that. I don't know, folks think that teachers know.
Yeah, especially if the student is in general education. And I would say, I taught in elementary, but I would say it probably is even worse in middle and high school when they have multiple class sessions. The teacher literally might not really know if the student has an IEP because you have so many students on your roster. You're just trying to deal with the students on your roster. It may be another student in the class who technically doesn't have an IEP, but they're really giving you more. You're trying to deal with them, and your student might be getting lost in the mix. At the beginning of the school year, oftentimes the teachers are not opening up all the CUME folders that are in the office and seeing who has inside their CUME folder an IEP or going through the database online to check. They're just getting their things together. They're just trying to make sure the classroom is set up and they have all the materials for the first day. So they genuinely might not even know your child has an IEP. They definitely might not know the goals on the IEP. So I would say, as a parent, if you can, it's really good to be proactive and letting the teacher know that your child has an IEP, what their goals are, things like that.
I think I would say that is a must-have. I have a client right now who's in a school district up north. Son had an IEP, preschool, and went to kindergarten. Kindergarten teacher didn't know the student had an IEP. Went to first grade teacher didn't know the student had an IEP. Not being implemented, right? And now she says, wow, now she's coming to us saying, my kid hasn't had his IEP implemented for 2 years. But she didn't know some things. And so that's why I'm so happy you guys are here. I mean, she literally didn't know that there's supposed to be an annual IEP meeting. No one told her, no, she didn't find it out in any way. And so now we're dealing with that and helping her deal with it. But I'm telling you, at the school site, and the questions I would get sometimes, when I was first start doing it, when my team first started doing it, I was just surprised. But over time, it came to me, it just became real to me that, man, when it comes to special education, a lot of people just don't know. It's just a small part of education, and so it's overwhelmed by everything else that they're actually teachers and principals are learning. And so we have to be the ones, and including myself with you heroes out there, that we have to be the ones to let the teachers know and the administrators know. My child has an IEP and I expect the IEP to be implemented.
I also wanted to, it goes to another question that was asked earlier, but I think one of the best things in the toolkit for making sure the IEP is actually getting implemented are amendment IEP meetings.
Yeah.
If you feel that something is not going right, if your child has maybe expressed that they're not getting the services or accommodations that they should be, an amendment IEP meeting is definitely something that you should do. And even she was talking earlier about somebody had kind of discouraged the parent from doing an amendment IEP meeting. Why? There's no downside, you know, like even if it is early, just in case, call it. Nothing bad happens from having an amendment IEP meeting. And actually, I think it's one of the most powerful things that comes with the IEP.
Yes.
One of the biggest benefits of having an IEP is now that you have this right, whenever throughout the school year that you feel that things are not going well, to call a meeting, to have administrators there, to have the teacher there, to have all these stakeholders there that have to listen to what you're saying. Parents whose children don't have an IEP do not have that right. They cannot call up the school and have a legal right that you all have to meet with me during school hours and you have to provide a substitute for my child's teacher so that they could come and sit in on this meeting and talk about this with me. Well, I think one of the most powerful tools for anything, if the IEP isn't working out, if it's a great IEP but it's not being implemented, if there's just issues going on, if you feel uncomfortable with the child's teacher and something the child told you, an amendment IEP can really help out with that. So I think it's one of the most underutilized things in a toolkit that parents don't often use.
I agree, and I think I would just add that an emergency amendment IEP meeting, also a great tool when there's a really serious issue. Amendment IEPs have to take place within 30 days of when you ask. Emergency IEPs take place when you need them to take place. So that
Within a
could be,
reasonable period, and
within a
that's
reasonable
very,
period.
you know.
Right, could be the
but
next
It's
day.
just whatever makes sense,
right,
would make
Is that
sense.
with like school days, school days, like 30 days
Mhm.
of school days? or,
calendar.
like,
Calendar days.
calendar days? Okay, even
And-
in summer?
Let's get mom in the middle.
Yeah,
During the
that-
summer,
Not,
It
that summer
depends.
doesn't count.
Oh, okay, just wanna make sure.
and if there's extended
Yes,
school
yes,
year
right.
going
In school,
on,
right.
and your child's in extended school year.
That's right.
But, and this is the thing, guys, I don't want you to get caught up on any of these rules, any of them. This is your standard. Is this making any sense? Is this taking too long? Is my kid getting what my kid needs? Because I don't want you to go to the other extreme of, well, I'm gonna stand on what this, this rule is. No, the rules are such that your children should be getting what your children need in a timely fashion. Now, what about the teacher can't come? The teacher's not there and at the IEP meeting, and will you waive the teacher's presence because we couldn't get a substitute? It's a hassle for you to have to come back again. But the answer is, no,
Figure it out.
will or will be.
And
continued.
sometimes they might figure it out right then. All of a
Yes.
sudden they
Yes.
can call somebody from, and they have a sub on campus and we can
Yes.
figure it out, so.
Yes.
Let's go with mom here and mom in the middle.
Well,
On the
so
other
that was my
hand,
thing.
if you do record, are you going to keep some conversation from taking place that could have taken place? So that's the flip side of it. If people record, sometimes they're a little more careful than they would be. And I kind of like you to get so comfortable that you're going to say that crazy thing that we heard you say. Because I think we all need to be careful about normalizing things.
Yes.
You talked about the teacher so often that says, oh, he's doing fine. Yeah, he's doing fine relative to all of the other students who are below grade level in his class. Running out of class, honey, running out of class one time, that elopement, and that's what we're gonna call it. We're gonna call it elopement, one time
Yes.
is a factor to be addressed. I may need a one-on-one aid. Kiddo may need to actually be in a non-public school, I don't know. But that's a safety issue, one time. And if you have children at a school that are running all up and down the hallway, perhaps it's normalized there. But we don't consider it normal.
I want to add two things. First, I think it's so amazing that you do the All About Me and you bring it to the teacher at the beginning of the year, because I was a kindergarten teacher and I had students that, even though I had a heart for them, I loved all of my students, I really wanted to try my best. Sometimes I was like, I don't know what to do. And the parent really does know the child best.
Yeah.
And most teachers really do want to work together with you for the benefit of your child. Sometimes I was at such a loss and I was like, I wish the parent could help me out some. Sometimes they didn't have any answers. Sometimes they were looking at me and we were looking at each other like, what we gonna do? But it's so helpful when you have a parent just at the beginning, because the worst thing is to find out later. Like, you're just going through your day and then you're like, hold on, like,
Right.
wait. It's better to have a little bit of a warning, like, my child might do this. If he or she does, this is kind of something that you could do. Work together and be on the same team as the educator. And it goes a really long way. They'll remember that later and be like, you know what, I actually really like his mom or his dad or her dad, and I'm gonna just help them out this one time. Like, teachers are human too.
Right.
So that's really helpful. And I think another separate note, normalization of things that really shouldn't be normalized is actually huge in schools in general, and it definitely affects students with special needs. What I mean by that is, like, your child with an IEP is not the only child not meeting the grade level standards in the class.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of students without IEPs in the class who probably aren't meeting the grade level standards either, or whose behavior isn't meeting what it should be either. And that's why the teacher is telling you it's not a big deal. Because they're looking around to the rest of the students in the class, they're not at grade level, their behavior isn't right, so it's just all becoming normal. But grade level standards don't lie. So that's why I really encourage the parents, whatever grade that your child is in, whatever age that they are, go online and you can look up, I know the Common Core state standards, and when I would teach, I would print out the state standards in kind of simple I can statements, so all the parents could see, this is what your child is supposed to be able to do by the end of this grade. Match up what it says on the website to what your child can do. Maybe even try to give them a few little activities at home, like If the grade level standard says they should be able to read a passage, a first grade passage in, so many minutes, look up a first grade passage online and see if your child can do it in that many minutes. And the standards don't lie. If your child is not matching up to the standard, it's a problem. Even if all the rest of the students in the class aren't matching up to the standard, it's still a problem. But it does become very normalized.
Mediocrity.
Yes.
Mom.
Everything you're saying, we just had.
Don't want to freak out. You don't want to freak out, and mom doesn't want to freak out on the one hand. But on the other hand, that IEP is not stigmatizing. It is, in fact, a key to unlock a world of services and opportunities from elementary through college and into grad school. You don't have to be afraid of the stigma. The stigma comes when your child is just siloed and warehoused in a special day class and coloring. Oh, okay, that's rough.
IEP does and should indicate when reports on your grandson's progress is going to be provided. And sometimes they'll kind of indicate that it's going to be provided in a report card. I don't like that. I mean, I really do. I would push for at least quarterly reports from all of the service providers. Because that's the only way you're going to know whether or not the goals are being met. The other thing is, sometimes when we talk about gobbledygook, the most gobbledygook part of a IEP are the goals. Mm-hmm. It's like, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. I was actually had a hearing where I had the director of special education on the witness stand, and I had him look at a goal, and I said, what does this mean? What is it supposed to measure? He stood there for about 30 seconds and he said, I don't know. I mean, he didn't even know what was going to, so the goals should be written in ways that you can understand, and actually are key to being able to understand what has to come next, and even understand what assessments need to be performed, actually. So it's, what we're doing here, I mean, what we're all doing here is in a way we're really conducting almost like an experiment with the child, right? Because we're trying to give the child a lot of services to see how it impacts the child's progress. If you have the goals and you look at the progress and you see that there's no progress, that means we have to change something. Mm-hmm. And that's where the assessment comes in, because you say, well, my grandson's not doing well in this area of math. We need to have an assessment to determine what specifically is going on with him. Why isn't he getting it? And sometimes you need to, maybe there's a processing issue, so you have a psychoeducational assessment that includes processing. Maybe it's really he does have behavior challenges. He can't attend. He's not really paying attention. But you have to have an assessment to determine what it is that is going on with the student.
And minimally every year in all of the areas of suspected disability, at that triennial IEP meeting should be a new round of assessments, but that's minimally.
Right.
Because when something pops up, then you can have an assessment and ask for an assessment in between those 3 years.
That's right.
And if the district does an awful job, you can ask for an IEE.
That's correct.
Where the district has to pay for someone outside of the district to perform that assessment.
I think one of the most important thing about assessments is that they're supposed to be comprehensive.
Yeah.
So your student is entitled to a comprehensive assessment of their whole person, anything that affects their ability to learn at school. I think a lot of parents don't even know all the assessments that are available. So like if your child is having behavior challenges, they should have a behavior assessment. Yeah. And when I say a behavior assessment, I don't want to see fill in the bubble assessment from the teacher rate on a scale of 1 to 10. I want somebody coming into the classroom, sitting down, observing the child. I want somebody observing the child out on the play yard. During the passing periods, what are they doing? I want an in-depth behavior assessment. Especially if they have behavior challenges, that little fill in the bubble is not going to cut it for you to come up with good supports for that student. If they have social challenges, there should be a social assessment to see how their social skills are and how are they socializing with other people. I've seen recreational therapy assessments. I've seen all physical therapy, adapted physical education. Any issue that you see your child having, there should be an assessment for it. The school could even do their version of an ADHD assessment. Any type of assessment that you can imagine, any type of issue your child is having, there's an assessment for it, and the school needs to do an assessment in that area.
And your psychoeducational evaluation, you've got to make sure that folks, even within that, are assessing for the range of possibilities.
Yeah.
So do not let folks get away with, if there's a suspected, perhaps even the possibility of the child being on the autism spectrum, that needs to be assessed for.
Another one, dyslexia. If your student has been having reading challenges over and over again, you don't know how many IEPs I've read where the student has been having reading challenges their whole life. Nobody ever thought, let's assess for dyslexia.
But we literally have children that are eligible under the category emotional disturbance that have never been assessed for autism, and it turns out that they actually are on the spectrum. Same with ADHD. Yeah, ADHD, or is it autism? And so the assessments are important.
So, and in addition to getting an assessment in every single area, the assessments have so much good stuff in it.
Yes.
So first of all, don't get distracted by a lot of the language in there, which can be confusing. I read the assessments and some of the stuff confuses me. I have a special education credential. I've read so many assessments and some of it still, confuses me. But in every assessment, there's going to be things you can understand. If you see something that says below average, if you see something that says well below average, if you see something that says like far below average.
If you see the grade level equivalent and it says first grade and your child's in 7th grade.
Right.
Oh, that
You don't need to know anything about the percentile. You don't need to know any about the bell curve. All you get to know is if it says well below average, what area did it say that in, and where on the IEP does it address it?
And skip
so it
to-
has to be a continuity from the assessments to the goals to the services. And the assessment should match up with what you're seeing at home. It should not say, oh, they're doing perfect in this, but you know they're not doing perfect in that. So you have to, and whatever is in the assessment, it needs to be reflected in those present levels of performance. It needs to be goals that address the areas of the assessments, and then there should be services. If the behavior assessment is saying that there's behavior problems, and you look to the services part of the IEP and there's no services addressing behavior, that's a red flag. If the speech assessment said, oh, well below average in expressive speech, and it's no speech services at the end of the IEP, what are we doing? Like, it all has to match up.
Yeah.
Okay.
that this is a marathon, not a sprint. That after the IEP meeting's over and you don't get an IEP to sign, you gotta go and talk to folks and say, and I mean, after about a week, I think a week is a long time. It's like, in fact, you actually are gonna have to call another IEP meeting because you're going to need to get a different kind of therapist. And just, we're not grateful because they gave your daughter therapy. No, we're a little concerned because they gave your daughter therapy that wasn't appropriate. And they need to. So not being afraid to be an irritant, a thorn in somebody's side. You're a squeaky wheel, hon. They get the oil. And as long as your concerns are legitimate, as long as you're respectful, I don't care how many times I gotta talk to you. It's gonna be over and over and over again. And I'm gonna keep ratcheting it up by, saying, do I need to go to informal dispute resolution?
Persistence
Yeah,
pays
do I
off.
have to file a due
Persistence pays
process?
off.
You're saying these kind of things.
Okay.
Also, the paper that we passed out to you all with the Parental IEP Plan, you can request, and the district is supposed to add that in with the IEP record, like as an added page on the IEP, so that any of the concerns that you brought should be in the student's record forever. Obviously, that's something that you want to check on and make sure that they do. You might have to just keep bothering them, just like was just said. You gotta bother people sometimes.
Yes, there's a point at which we don't care.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't care what the motivation was. Because I do that. I want to know why, but really, who cares?
Can I say one more
They
thing?
need to do it.
Because I think this brings up something that I know happens a lot, is the school district will send you signature pages without the IEP and ask you to sign the signature page. Do not do that. Don't do that. I mean, because I think you really need to read it to the extent that you can. And to me, for you, some of the most important parts of it, in terms of being able to sort of navigate whether you want to sign it or not, are in the notes.
Yeah.
When they say, what was said and what wasn't said. If you get the notes and you see that it's inaccurate, don't sign it. And tell them it's inaccurate and that it doesn't include X, Y, Z. But I see it all the time. The other thing related to that is a lot of school districts want you to go to the IEP without first having given you the assessments. No, let's not do that. You want to know what they're saying about your job beforehand so that you're prepared to create your agenda and you're prepared to have an intelligent discussion about what's going on and ask questions.
Which means that sometimes that invitation, the date they gave you, it's too close.
It's too close.
Because they need time to get themselves together. They gave you that invitation, they haven't even finished that assessment yet. District, I'm gonna need those assessments and I'm gonna need them 3 days out from the IEP
That's right.
date.
I want to say one thing about the notes page on the IEP and why it's really, really important. I was talking to a parent the other day and she had an IEP meeting about her son and they had all come to an agreement that the son would be going to a certain middle school next year and everything was great at the IEP meeting. A few months later, people were changing their story. They no longer was that agreement valid anymore. They didn't say that. She went back to look at the notes page from the IEP of that day. There was no discussion on the notes page about anything that they had talked about in terms of agreeing to a certain middle school. I told her, that's not the end of the story. We can still help out. There's still things that could be done. But that's why it's really important to read back through the IEP. And if you feel that there's something missing that should have been on there, make sure that they put that on there.
Another tip for Ratchet and Get Up is that point person who you always communicate with, and this time they're not getting it done, you're sending that email now to that point person, but you're also gonna send that email to somebody else as well. You're CCing a bunch of people, including the principal, including maybe the area superintendent, I don't know. But you're kind of embarrassing that person and putting them on blast by CCing a bunch of other people now.
We have 5 minutes left in our session, so I'm gonna actually give Amanda has not had an opportunity to ask a question yet. To ask a question, I'm gonna.
Thank you, I'm gonna try to be quicker. I have numerous.
This school district, what occurred to me is that if the school that he's currently attending is essentially having him leave because of disciplinary issues, I would actually call that a violation of manifestation determination.
That's
because
right.
When you've got an IEP, in order for someone to do a disciplinary removal, and that's what I would call it, I'm calling it a disciplinary removal. Yes, thank you. Write it down because I want you to use this kind of terminology. When they do a disciplinary removal, first, they have to have a manifestation determination to make sure that the behavior was not something that is part of his disability.
That's just another type of IEP meeting.
Right.
There's a lot of different types of IEP meetings. A manifestation determination is just one type of IEP meeting that happens when a student might be getting suspended or expelled, but they have an IEP. They're supposed to be doing a manifestation determination meeting to see whatever the behavior that would happen, is it a manifestation of their disability?
And if it is, no removal. No removal.
Right, and can I say this, and just stepping back and looking at it as a more globally, If the school is basically saying that they can't educate your son, they can say that, but they still have the obligation to do so. And they have an obligation to find him the right placement.
An appropriate placement.
An appropriate placement. Whether that means at that school, at a non-public school, other school that they pay for, a non-public school that they pay for, who will provide him, who can provide him with the services and provide him with the accommodation he needs to access the curriculum at the new school.
And then a transition IEP would need to take place.
Right, but my point though is that if they're making statements, it sounds like to me they're making statements that say, we just can't handle it. Well, okay, you can't do it, well, we need to find somebody who can, that you're gonna pay for, and that you're going to provide services and accommodations that will allow him to attend a new school that you would be happy with.
And again, how is all of this taking place conversationally as opposed to formally in an IEP meeting?
Yeah. Lastly, I would say if he's been suspended, they can only suspend him for 10 days. I mean, that's the
For the
maximum
whole
number of days
school
for the whole
year.
school year.
60-day period is what's legally required, but you can still ask that they get it done sooner.
Yes.
There's no reason not to ask, because guess when the cutoff was? Just last week. I think it was maybe Thursday, at least LA Unified was telling us. Thursday was the cutoff to get it done within 60 days this year. So come on now, you can get it
I
done.
think either way, to me, it's clear that the placement that your child is in is not fitting for them.
Yeah.
You know the homeschool is definitely not going to be fitting for them.
Yeah.
So it just leaves you in a place where is a fit? And I think the most, unfortunately, a lot of times it is the parent. It is the parent who has to figure it out. And it is the parent who has to say, like, talk to people you know. Network here. Look up online.
Yeah.
What might be a fit for your child? Research that. Find that out as much as you can, and get ready to start whatever process that you need to do to get your child there. Whether that is going through due process, maybe you can go through an internal dispute